I'm Simon Hampton. I'm a freelancer in Brussels. I want to talk about upgrading, essentially rewriting an Angular 1 app to use ng2+ngrx. We heard about it this morning, armed with Rob Wormwold's presentation, I think, from ng2+ngrx or Angular Connect. I set about upgrading the app that I run for my sister, who is a blogger in Amsterdam. She blogs about restaurants. She's been to over 500 of them, and her app helps you discover the best places to eat there. The key challenge for the app, it's not a very complicated one, but the key challenge is the bootstrapping. Because basically I have to collect the restaurant data from the server. I need to read from any state of the filters that I want to apply to the data from the URL. I might need to get the location of the user if they're in Amsterdam, and I need to load Google Maps. And all of these things happen asynchronously, which means that there were 24 ways in which the app could start. And this I always found to be something of a challenge. With Angular 1, I had a sort of a state array that was mutable, and basically as things became available, I added it to this array, and each time the program tried to sort of advance, it checked whether all the elements that it needed were in this state array. It wasn't very pretty. The question was, could I do better using the latest and greatest technology? And I think I've made some progress on that. Most of my time is spent writing Elm, in fact. So reactive programming makes a lot of sense to me. And the Elm architecture is what sort of gave rise to and inspired Redux. So if you take Redux and add RxJS, you get ng2+ngrx. You got something that in theory at least, I was going to feel quite comfortable with. And as you heard this morning, that means a sort of a central store, immutable, that only the reducers will operate upon. And one way then data flow down to presentational components. The diagram on the right summarizes that, and if any of you have done Elm, then you'll recognize that it's sort of inspired by the way that things happen in that language. So let's work out how this all happens. Let's start from the top. ng2+ngrx starts with a declaration in app.module. You need to declare your store, and you need to declare its structure, and you need to declare the reducers that are going to apply upon it. They're going to apply to it. And then ng2+ngrx does all the rest. Each action that comes in, it passes them through the reducers, recombines the result, and passes it to you. So app.module. Next will come, of course, the parent component. Oh no, so we've got our store, we're going to have our reducers that operate upon it. Those reducers are going to be returning immutable data, so we're going to be using sort of array.map, object.assign and things like that. One little trap that I did fall into was that I had this default set of, for the filters that the user might use, I had a set of default values. Initially, I just made the state equal to that when I started. And it turned out that this object was being passed down into the filters component, which is itself a form with ng-form in it. And ng-form mutates everything wildly. And so as I was then trying to rely upon this object later to reset the form, this wasn't working because it had been mutated. So I found that I needed even to use object.assign in the original sort of default, the initial value for the state. That's not something I've seen in many of the presentations, so I mention it here specifically. Right. After the store with its reducers, we move to the parent component. Now this is being passed from ng2+ngrx, the ng2+ngrx store, which is an observable. So we're going to be working in observable land here. So inside our controller, for example, we're going to use things like combined latest, which is combining the restaurant data and the filter data. The restaurants which may or may not exist, may or may not include details of how far they are away if we've got the geographic data. And then we're going into the template where we unpack that using the async pipe. In our children, we've now got unpacked data. So if we need to act any further on it, we can just use synchronous files, synchronous methods. I'm going to skip the up channel because that was just mentioned by a couple of speakers ago, the actions coming back up to the top. But the conclusion is that, for me at least, ng2+ngrx provided a simple declarative method to orchestrate this, the bootstrapping of my app, handling very elegantly the 24 permutations that occurred. A couple of issues that did occur for me. I was trying to work with immutable data. Yes, you can, if you want, go all the way to immutable.js, but that seemed quite a lot. On the other hand, if you don't, then it's very easy to get caught out. JavaScript is hugely mutable, and I certainly got caught out a couple of times. Technology called deep freeze certainly helped me start tracking down some of the bugs. The other thing was Google Maps. Google Maps knows nothing about observables whatsoever, and it doesn't really fit into the whole Angular 2 sort of way of doing things. I had to write my own sort of diffing engine to redraw the markers as and when they changed on the app. And these markers return a little reference so that if you need to destroy them, you can. And the question was, do I store these little references, which are ancillary to the map, in the main store, or just in the map component? I chose to do the latter, which is something that you wouldn't actually be able to do in Elm. So, in conclusion, if you're ever hungry in Amsterdam, here's a set of recommendations for you. And if you're not in Amsterdam, but you want to see some code, my attempt to implement ng2+ngrx, feel free to take a look on GitHub. Thank you.